At 10:26 local time over the Sea of Azov, a Ukrainian Ludi drone began a high-speed approach toward a Russian Il-38N naval reconnaissance aircraft positioned on the ground in the Black Sea region. The aircraft was described as the only platform Russia had in the area capable of detecting and tracking Ukraine's newest emerging operational weapon. Satellite imagery taken 6 hours before the strike showed ground crews removing engine covers, clearing equipment, and preparing the aircraft for flight readiness by 1300. This created a narrow operational window for the Ukrainian side, as the aircraft would become significantly harder to destroy once airborne. By 10:31, the Ludi drone crossed the Ukrainian coastline and descended to approximately 50 meters above the sea surface. The route required a 280-kilometer transit over open water at a speed of around 220 kilometers per hour, a flight estimated to take 76 minutes. The drone's composite airframe reduced radar reflection, but its primary advantage was altitude. Flying at 50 meters placed it below the effective detection horizon of Russian radar systems within roughly 200 kilometers. Radar waves travel in straight lines, and at such low altitude, the curvature of the Earth limited detection capability, rendering the drone effectively invisible for most of its sea crossing. This phase ended at 11:47, when the drone made landfall east of Primorsko-Akhtarsk, with approximately 70 kilometers remaining to the target area and an estimated 19 minutes to impact. Upon crossing the coastline, detection conditions changed. Near the village of Starotitarovskaya, Russian forces had deployed acoustic sensors mounted on telecommunications infrastructure. Each unit contained 4 omnidirectional microphones and processing systems designed to classify airborne threats based on sound signatures. At 11:47, the system registered initial traces of the drone's engine at approximately 53 decibels, above the ambient rural noise level. The processor conducted a fast Fourier transform to separate frequencies and compare them to known signatures. Within about 1.3 seconds, the system classified the source as an unmanned aerial vehicle with 87% confidence and determined a bearing of approximately 245 degrees. Additional sensors along the Krasnodar coast, spaced 3 to 5 kilometers apart, provided further bearings within seconds. Through triangulation, Russian systems generated a hostile UAV track accurate to within roughly 50 meters, updating every 2 to 3 seconds. While the Ukrainian drone remained unaware of the tracking process, Russian forces moved to respond. At 11:52, 5 minutes after detection, track data reached a Tor M2 air defense battery positioned near Starovskaya, approximately 18 kilometers southeast of the drone's path. The Tor M2 is designed as a short-range air defense system capable of engaging multiple targets. However, the engagement geometry posed a significant challenge. At low altitude, radar acquisition required elevation angles that avoided ground reflection interference. At 18 kilometers, a target flying at approximately 30 meters presented an elevation angle near 0.1 degrees, effectively merging with ground clutter on radar displays. Calculations indicated that to detect a 30-meter altitude target, the radar would need the drone to approach within roughly 1.2 kilometers. At 180 kilometers per hour, the drone would cross that narrow acquisition window in approximately 24 seconds, and only if flying directly toward the battery, which it was not. As acoustic updates continued to show the drone moving at 16, 15, and then 12 kilometers distance, the radar failed to produce a clear track. By 11:57, the drone had passed beyond the battery's effective engagement envelope. The operation unfolded against a backdrop of heightened aerial and counter-aerial activity in the Black Sea region. The Il-38N, a naval reconnaissance aircraft equipped with advanced electronic intelligence systems, represented a critical component of Russian maritime surveillance. Its destruction on the ground would not only remove a platform from service, but also alter the operational balance in an area where both sides have increasingly relied on unmanned systems, low-altitude flight profiles, and sensor networks to gain tactical advantage. The initial phase of the strike combined low-altitude radar evasion, acoustic detection countermeasures, and rapid defensive response attempts. Within less than 2 hours from launch, the engagement evolved from maritime transit to inland interception efforts, setting the stage for a complex, multi-layered confrontation between unmanned systems and air defense assets in southern Russia. As the TORM-2 battery near Starovskaya failed to obtain a radar lock due to low-altitude engagement geometry, the situation continued to develop beyond ground-based air defenses. Approximately 40 kilometers to the west, another system had already been launched under standing Russian response procedures. At 10:50, only minutes after the Ukrainian drone began its mission, a Gon-2 drone took off near Temryuk. Unlike standard one-way attack drones, this platform had been modified to carry a 9K333 Verba surface-to-air missile mounted on top of its fuselage using aluminum brackets, effectively transforming an Iranian-derived Shahed-type airframe into an improvised airborne air defense interceptor. The modification added approximately 12 kilograms of weight, reducing the drone's endurance to about 90 minutes. By 11:47, when the Ukrainian Ludi drone crossed the coastline, the Gon-2 had been airborne for nearly 1 hour and had roughly 30 minutes of fuel remaining. It carried a single Verba missile and was receiving acoustic tracking data that placed the hostile UAV at a bearing of 095 degrees, range 38 kilometers, heading northeast. The operator adjusted the course eastward, descended to 600 meters, and began searching for the target. The engagement environment over Krasnodar territory presented significant challenges. The Ukrainian drone was flying at approximately 30 meters above ground level over irrigation canals, frozen farmland, bare trees, and scattered rural structures. These ground features complicated infrared discrimination, making it difficult to isolate the thermal signature of a small turbojet engine from background variations in temperature. At 12:07, a ridgeline obstructed the Ukrainian drone's path, leaving no alternative route. The Ludi drone climbed to approximately 80 meters to clear the terrain feature, and then descended again on the far side. This maneuver exposed its engine exhaust against the colder December sky for approximately 3 seconds. During that brief window, the Gon-2 operator's camera acquired a clear visual on the target. Commands were issued in sequence, first to open the missile cover, second to align the drone's fuselage toward the bearing, and third to fire once the tri-channel seeker confirmed a lock. The Verba missile seeker relies on ultraviolet, infrared, and mid-infrared channels to distinguish genuine engine signatures from decoys or reflections. The missile launched and descended toward the target. 11 seconds after launch, as the missile approached an altitude of approximately 18 meters and the Ludi drone leveled out at roughly 25 meters, the proximity fuse triggered prematurely. The detonation occurred over an abandoned tractor in a stream bed rather than the drone itself. The 1.5 kilogram warhead exploded into frozen earth, scattering fragments across the field. The Ukrainian drone, positioned approximately 40 meters ahead of the blast point, experienced shock from the explosion but sustained no damage. The Gon-2 operator observed the explosion without evidence of debris or confirmed destruction. With only 9 minutes of fuel remaining and the sole missile expended, the interceptor drone could no longer engage directly. The Gon-2 lacked the speed to overtake the Ludi drone and was limited to relaying updated position data to ground-based defenses. The Ukrainian drone continued toward its objective with approximately 26 kilometers remaining. At this stage, the mission entered a critical targeting phase. The Ludi drone was required to identify and strike a specific aircraft among multiple similar platforms positioned on the apron. The intended target was an IL-38N naval reconnaissance aircraft. The IL-38 and IL-38N share nearly identical external silhouettes, including 4 turboprop engines, high-mounted wings, and elongated fuselages. From a low-altitude approach angle, distinguishing between variants presents a technical challenge. The key identifying feature of the IL-38N is the rectangular NV9 electronic intelligence pod mounted above the cockpit. This module contains passive electronic intelligence receivers capable of intercepting and classifying radar and radio emissions. Destruction of this component would neutralize the aircraft's core surveillance function. The Ukrainian drone carried an air-burst fragmentation warhead designed specifically for precision effects against sensitive equipment. Rather than relying solely on contact detonation, the system incorporated a radar altimeter programmed to trigger the explosive charge at an altitude of 6 meters above the target. The warhead contained a central explosive surrounded by 2.8mm steel fragment cubes. Upon detonation, the blast was shaped downward in a focused cone to concentrate energy toward the aircraft's surface rather than dispersing outward. Fragments accelerated to approximately 1,800 meters per second, crossing the 6-meter gap in approximately 3.3 milliseconds. The resulting impact pattern covered roughly 4 meters in width, producing an estimated 40 fragment strikes per square meter, sufficient to penetrate aluminum aircraft skin and damage internal systems. The design was intended to destroy avionics, sensor arrays, and processing units without requiring a large conventional explosion. At 12:15 and 21 seconds, the warhead detonated slightly beyond the optimal aim point due to obstacle avoidance adjustments during final approach. Despite the marginal offset, the NV-9 pod absorbed hundreds of direct fragment impacts. The housing was ruptured, antenna arrays were shredded, and processing units were destroyed. The forward mission compartment containing the NV-4 computer system was eliminated. This system was responsible for fusing radar tracks, magnetic anomaly detector inputs, sonobuoy data, and electronic intercepts into an integrated operational picture. Secondary fragment strikes severed oil and fuel lines near the No. 2 engine. Within seconds, fire ignited in the affected area. The aircraft did not explode, but sustained catastrophic mission system damage. Critical intelligence processing capability was eliminated, rendering the platform inoperable as a reconnaissance and submarine hunting asset. The strike concluded within the narrow window before the aircraft reached flight readiness. By combining low-altitude transit to evade radar detection, acoustic tracking resistance during maritime approach, precision targeting discrimination, and a purpose-built air-burst warhead, the Ukrainian operation achieved destruction of the aircraft's core intelligence systems on the ground. Russian defensive measures, including acoustic tracking networks, short-range air defense systems, and an improvised airborne interceptor, were unable to prevent the final impact. The destruction of the Il-38N on the ground in the Black Sea region has immediate operational consequences. According to the details of the strike, the aircraft was not destroyed by a large secondary explosion, but rendered non-functional through the elimination of its mission-critical systems. The NV-9 electronic intelligence pod mounted above the cockpit was penetrated by hundreds of high-velocity steel fragments. Antenna arrays were shredded, the housing was ruptured, and internal processing units were destroyed. The forward mission compartment, including the NV-4 computer responsible for fusing radar tracks, magnetic anomaly detector inputs, sonobuoy data, and intercepted electronic emissions, was eliminated within milliseconds of detonation. Although structural elements such as the wings, tailboom, and portions of the fuselage remained physically intact, the aircraft ceased to function as a reconnaissance and submarine hunting platform. Secondary fragment impacts severed oil and fuel lines near the No. 2 engine, leading to ignition shortly after impact. The fire further compromised the aircraft's operational viability. The strike occurred before the platform reached flight readiness, preventing it from becoming airborne and significantly more difficult to engage. The operation demonstrated the interaction between multiple detection and counter-detection systems. Russian forces deployed an acoustic sensor network along the Krasnodar coast, consisting of more than 200 nodes spaced 3 to 5 kilometers apart. These systems detected the drone's engine signature shortly after it crossed the coastline, classified it as an unmanned aerial vehicle within approximately 1.3 seconds, and generated a track with an estimated accuracy of 50 meters through triangulation. Despite this rapid detection and tracking capability, the transition from acoustic tracking to kinetic interception proved ineffective. The Tor M2 air defense battery positioned near Stadovskaya received track data within 5 minutes of detection. However, low-altitude engagement geometry prevented successful radar acquisition. The drone's flight profile at approximately 30 meters above ground level produced an elevation angle near 0.1 degrees at 18 kilometers distance, effectively merging with ground clutter. Calculations indicated that detection would have required the target to approach within approximately 1.2 kilometers, leaving only seconds for engagement and only under specific approach conditions that did not materialize. The airborne GON-2 interceptor, equipped with a single 9K333 Verba missile, represented an improvised attempt to extend defensive coverage. The system achieved visual acquisition during a brief altitude change by the Ukrainian drone, but the missile detonated prematurely on ground clutter rather than the intended target. With no additional missile available and limited fuel remaining, the interceptor was unable to prevent the strike and was reduced to relaying positional updates. The strike combined several technical elements: low-altitude sea transit to remain below radar detection horizons, exploitation of terrain masking over land, artificial intelligence-based acoustic classification on the defensive side, and precision target discrimination during final approach. The Ukrainian drone's airburst fragmentation warhead was designed to produce concentrated downward-directed effects, prioritizing destruction of sensitive electronics rather than relying solely on structural damage. By triggering at approximately 6 meters above the aircraft surface and dispersing 2.8 mm steel fragments at high velocity, the system achieved a dense impact pattern sufficient to penetrate aluminum skin and disable internal systems. The timing of the operation was critical. Satellite imagery taken hours before the strike indicated preparation for flight readiness by 1300. The detonation at 12:15 and 21 seconds occurred within that window, ensuring the aircraft remained grounded at the moment of impact. Once airborne, interception would have required different engagement parameters and potentially more complex air defense coordination. The outcome leaves Russia without its only Il-38N platform in the Black Sea region, according to the operational context described. The loss affects regional maritime surveillance, electronic intelligence collection, and anti-submarine warfare capability. While the airframe may remain physically present, the destruction of core processing and sensor systems constitutes operational neutralization. The engagement illustrates the evolving dynamics of unmanned aerial warfare, including the use of low-altitude flight to evade radar, the deployment of acoustic detection networks as a countermeasure, and the adaptation of existing drone platforms for improvised air defense roles. It also underscores the limitations of short-range radar systems against targets operating close to the ground and the narrow reaction windows imposed by geometry and terrain. The strike concluded without Russian defenses achieving a confirmed interception. The Ukrainian objective was met before the aircraft could depart. For further updates and detailed analysis of ongoing developments in the region, subscribe to our channel and follow our continuing coverage.